Welcome to Evolution Stories by Middle States. This interview series is devoted to teaching you how to lead change in education. We're here because facilitating change in schools has never been harder or more important. So this is your place to learn from those who are leading the way.
Around the globe, thousands of schools are facing constant moments of crisis and change. And leading through that kind of change and ambiguity is no small task. Today, we're going to sit down with the president of an international school organization who is helping schools not just navigate that change and those crises, but to emerge stronger than ever before. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Christian Talbot. I'm the president of the Middle States Association, and I am thrilled to be joined today on our next episode of Evolution Stories. I am joined by Laura Light. Since 2021, Laura has been the executive director of the Association for the Advancement of International Education, also known as AAIE. Previously, she was the director of global recruitment at International School Services, also known as ISS, few acronyms here. And prior to joining ISS, Laura was an international educator in Kuwait, Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Singapore, London, Oregon, California, New York. She is a true third culture kid, and she has served on the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children Education Board. She's a member of the Diversity Collaborative. These are just some of the highlights from Laura's leadership and her career. And Laura, I am thrilled to be joined by you and have this conversation on Evolution Stories.
My honor to be here with you, Christian. Thank you for inviting me.
Let's start at the beginning. AAIE, I mentioned that acronym, Association for the Advancement of International Education. What is it and why does it matter so much?
Okay. I'm laughing as you're introducing me and talking about all the different entities I've been with. It is alphabet soup.
Yeah.
There's something about the international school world that loves acronyms. AAIE is a nonprofit based in Princeton, New Jersey. We have been around for 60 years. This is our 60th anniversary this year. Oh. We are in place to help support the world of international school leaders. So AIE is one of 7 sister organizations. Ours is unique in the fact that we are global and we work to support and help with networking and professional development of the administrative section of every international school around the world, or the international schools that are members with us. So we are the leadership realm within each and every school. Yeah. And again, we've been around for 60 years, so it's been a great time for AIE.
I didn't realize that this was the 60th anniversary. That's awesome. I had no connection to international education before I joined Middle States a little more than 3 years ago. And we got connected very early on at the first AAIE annual conference. And I was blown away, just absolutely blown away by the people in the room. I mean, you use the word, it's sort of like the leadership, AAIE is the leadership group among these 7 sister organizations. And I remember meeting you on the day before the conference started, when many of the accreditors were gathered to talk about interests. But then the next few days to meet school leaders from all around the world who were just the most impressive people and dealing with a lot of challenging situations. So tell me a little bit about the role that AAIE plays for them vis-a-vis their leadership obligations.
Good question. AIE is here to bring the leaders together because this niche of international schools is really sort of a well-kept secret. I've always said that. Many people will ask me, like, how did you find out about this world? How did you get into this world? And then when I start telling them about the aspect of these schools around the world, they're looking at me like, wow, how did you find that? And then within that realm of international schools, the leaders that guide these schools are incredible people. Yeah. So what does AIE do? When you're the leader in a school, whether it be in Africa or in Asia or in the Middle East, you're part of a community, but yet you're not. It's an isolating role. You are maybe a little bit of a silo where you are. Maybe you're in Saudi Arabia, or maybe you're in Brazil. And so It's a unique school in each of these various places. So AIE is here to bring these voices together. When you're in a leadership role, you need your peers. Well, anybody needs their peers, but when you're in a leadership role, being able to bring the peers together to say, what keeps you up at night? What's bothering you? How can we help each other? And that's the unique part of these international schools, is the support that they offer each other is immense. So that's a whole nother part of this conversation, but that's what AIE does. We bring people together. And at the same time, we're going through some incredible changes in the world. And so AIE is trying to help lead conversations, put people in place to guide as they move forward, as we go through these times of change. So that's what AIE does. We're here to be part of the community, build the community, help bring people together.
Yeah, it's such a great way of describing what you do. And I remember being struck that first time I joined you all, that like this organization is a convener and a curator of conversations and relationships. We will talk more about that, but there's so much power in that, and it is a well-kept secret. I think that's a good way to put it. Maybe too well-kept.
True,
I
agree.
Yeah. How did you get into international education yourself?
Interesting story. I'm a third culture kid. I was born and raised overseas. Left high school in Europe and went back to the States to go to college. And it was a family connection that got me into my first job at the American School of Kuwait. And they took a chance on me because I was 3 weeks out of college, and they offered me a position. And I think that kind of goes back to a little bit about me, which I might come up later, being a risk taker. And I think anybody who's in this world of international education has to recognize the fact that they are a risk taker. You don't pack up and move halfway around the world without having that ability to take risks. Yeah. So how did I get into it? It was a family connection. I landed at the American School of Kuwait. I looked around and said, wow, there's a whole network of international schools. And I took off from there.
Wow. Did you know you wanted to be a teacher, or?
Oh, I did. Yes. I had studied education. I had graduated from Clemson University in South Carolina, and had studied education. I knew, I thought I was going to graduate, get a job in the States, and move on, sort of, do that sort of scenario. And yet this came out of left field. I jumped, and I continue to jump.
Yeah.
And so that's
well, let's dig into that. I mean, if you thought you were going to be here in the United States, and then an opportunity, it's not obvious to me why you would say yes to Kuwait, right? So what was it about it that attracted you?
I was born overseas. So the aspect of going to a different country and trying something new. And again, I think I came from a family that instilled this sort of discover the world. People are great. There are some wonderful places around the world. And so it truly was my father that said, hey, I got a job for you. But again, it was a family connection. But again, I had been brought up this way. So third culture kids have a tendency to say, it's interesting. There was a research done on children who are called third culture kids, meaning, you're American, but you're born somewhere else and you travel around. Right. They say 2 out of 3 kids who grow up that way continue on in that lifestyle. The third one wants the white picket fence back at home. But I'm one of the 2 that said, okay, here's an opportunity. Off I go.
So you lived in Europe. Mm-hmm. Had you lived in the Middle East before Kuwait?
I had never even, honestly. It was a long time ago when I got this job. When I got the job offer, I didn't even know where Kuwait was.
Yeah, I mean, at 22, I don't think I would have known either.
Exactly.
So was that, yes, you're a third culture kid, but was that a kind of culture shock for you?
Or? Oh, of course it was. It was. But I think every time you go to a new country, you're going to have that culture shock no matter what. But I was very young. And there are pros and cons on that. Young, I was like wide-eyed, like, let's learn where we can go. Cons are like, oh my gosh, what do I get myself into? But I really enjoyed it. And it instilled in me the value of these international schools and what else is out there. And so I took off from there, and I moved to the Dominican Republic, and then I tried El Salvador, and then I tried Singapore. So it was a love of mine to continue working internationally. Yeah. But the bonus of it all was every one of those schools are just outstanding schools. So it was a great community to land in. People were welcoming. Again, well-kept secret.
Yeah. One of those schools is the Carol Morgan School, if
Yes.
I'm remembering correctly,
Yes.
because Middle States accredits Carol Morgan, and
And-
I loved hearing that connection.
One of my favorite places to
Yeah.
live. Carol Morgan School is near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, they're great folks there. So getting back to AAIE, you have kind of an unusual line of sight into this world of international schools, and particularly through the eyes of the leaders of these schools. Your line of sight is broad, it's deep, it's probably unmatched by almost anybody because of the unique position. You're not a regional, you're a global organization, and you work very closely with the United States Department of State Office of Overseas Schools. That's a mouthful, but
Yes, it is.
Um,
Another acronym.
what's that relationship like with the Overseas Schools Office?
It's a really good. We are very supported by the Office of Overseas Schools, and we support them as well. We have a very close relationship with them, and I think the world of the team there and the leadership there. They are really good to AIE as well. So the synchronicity, how we work together works well. They have actually, AIE was really started by the forefathers of the Office of Overseas Schools, Ernie Menino, who was the one who really started off the Office of Overseas Schools, and then that we developed out of there. So it's been a relationship that's been around since day one.
Yeah.
And it's a really important relationship. And I think the world of everyone in that office, and we have a tight relationship.
Yeah. And it's really interesting to me, the role that office plays, and that you're really helping them to play in ensuring high quality schools for United States citizens who are going to work overseas. But by virtue of ensuring high quality schools for US citizens, they're really ensuring high quality schools for anybody who enrolls their kids there. And yeah.
That's exactly right. Their mandate, or what their work is to do, is to make sure that their children, it is the children of embassy children and any other entity out there, have high quality education so that they can come and go. So what does AIE do to support that? All the schools that we work with are accredited. That is a mandate. To come on with AIE, you must be an accredited school. We make sure that these schools offer high quality education. And in actuality, years ago, that was really sort of the focus, to really focus in on and support the students from NGOs and the embassies. Now, our schools are very much what we'd call maybe a mixed bag. It is still where the American embassy children go, and it's still a strong tie. We get a lot of children from other countries and from the local countries.
Yeah.
And so I think actually that evolution is truly, again, what makes these schools outstanding schools, because they are American schools per se in these foreign countries, and yet they're multicultural. They are, the languages you hear, the cultures you get to experience, the people that you meet, they're just truly great places.
Yeah, yeah. Well, getting back to this broad and deep cross-section of schools that you have the ability to interact with and support, what's keeping you up at night about that global community?
What keeps me up at night is how I can help support these leaders, because what's keeping them up at night is immense. And so we can go on all different kinds of layers. We can talk about geopolitical issues, and it doesn't matter where you are in this world, you are still going to be dealing with geopolitical issues. But we work with schools in Myanmar. There's a civil war that's going on there. We work with schools, in Southeast Asia, and there's some tension that's building in that direction. Europe and what's happening there, what's happening everywhere within the globe. So the geopolitical issues. But then again, the other thing that's, I think, keeping the leaders up at night, which is what keeps me up at night, are the changes that they're going through. You hear about it on a daily basis, AI, how that's changing. And it really is changing how these schools are going to be run. The nice thing about these schools is that they have the ability to have some flexibility and move with the changes. I think they're better off than maybe sort of schools that you might find here in the United States.
Say more about that. Like, why is it that these schools have that maybe additional flexibility?
Because they're independent schools, and they're run by the board within their country, within their school. And usually those boards, well, not usually, always within the school, those boards want the best for their students. And so their mandate or their work that they can do, they have a lot more flexibility than, say, making changes here in this country. So again, that's what makes them unique, special, and really a great place to be. But again, that's what keeps the leaders up at night. Like, what is tomorrow going to bring? How am I going to address these AI issues or these geopolitical issues, or what are the other problems that are happening around many of the different problems going on. But that's where AIE comes in. Can we bring in leaders to talk about, how to lead through these, times of crisis? How can we lead through times of change with AI? How can we help support a school that's dealing with a civil war or a terrible experience that's just recently happened? And that's what AIE is about, bringing these schools together. We don't know all the answers. AIE is not here to give you the answers. AIE is here to set the community, to set the table, bring people together to say, hey, what can I do to help you? Or, hey, this is what I'm doing. And then people, can take it and go from there. And again, in these times of change, people jump on Zoom calls, they jump on calls and come together to work together.
Yeah.
Again, the uniqueness of this community.
I definitely want to come back to that in a moment, but you said something it's striking to me. I don't think I would have thought of this before, but as someone who's kind of hardwired to seek change myself, I tend to think of the situation you described, international schools having sort of the positive pressure of communities that want more, they want better or the best, as a great situation. Like, yeah, let's go, right? But in some ways, what I heard you say is that that's a two-edged sword. Yes, you can move faster. Yes, maybe you can be more adaptive and nimble, but then the flip side is
you don't know. And again, it's risk-taking. It is, we don't know how it's all going to play out. And leaders have to be really careful. I mean, you're dealing with people's children.
Right.
And so how they proceed. And again, the aspect of taking risks and moving in that direction is what people want, but doing it carefully and thoughtfully is really what's important. But I'm going to go back to that risk-taking piece. Again, I think that's what, again, I was a risk taker going off internationally. I think everybody who works in international schools are risk takers. So it does lead to keeping them up at night.
Yeah. So maybe sort of like the sharp end of the stick for them is, what particular form of change or forms of change should I bet on? Because we don't know what's going to happen.
Without
and there
doubt.
is some irreducible risk in whatever moves they're going to make. That's really interesting. I think maybe the grass is greener, and I'm thinking I'd be so envious if I were still leading a school here in the United States and looking at these schools internationally, but it might very well be that they think of it the other way around, that they wish for maybe a little more stability.
It's a lot of work. It really is. And this is what keeps them up at night. And so that's where we bring them together.
Yeah.
And again, the changes happening within this country are also keeping them up at night. The funding cuts, and how are they going to manage that? So it's hats off to every leader around the world. It's not an easy job, but that's stating the obvious.
Yeah. Well, those things that you described, global conflicts, whether they're military or otherwise, AI for sure. We can add to the list, things like increasing special education needs, right? The increasing challenges of social, emotional, human development, which are tied up with special education needs and AI and global. Like, all of these things are really thorny. I want you to talk a little bit about this experience that I had a kind of a secondhand view into, because I'm not an international school leader, but at this past year's AAIE, which took place in early February of 2025, we were in the conference hotel when the first cuts were announced to USAID, and then of course there were subsequent cuts.
Yeah.
And that must have just been like a complete shock. So walk us through what happened and what were you thinking?
Wow, it was quite the time to be in Washington, D.C. and bring everybody together. But in actuality, it was fortuitous that we were all together, because the aspect of going through these changes, the cuts being made, all of a sudden these mandates are being rolled out, and this is what's going to happen, and this is what's going to happen. If they had been back in their home country and in their silos, mean, everybody would have jumped on a call. They would have dealt with it as they had dealt with COVID. That's another conversation. But we would have found a way to come together. But being together gave us the ability to, oh my gosh, lunchtime, let's get together. What do we find out today? How are we going to navigate this? How can I help you? How can you help me as we move forward? And again, I think educators at heart are people who want to help each other. I mean, why do you go into education? You want a better tomorrow. And so the leaders were all in the same room. And truly, it was done on the spur. Something came down that morning or the day before. Mike was picked up, said, having a lunchtime, we're bringing everybody together. Bring your questions. And what was really interesting was we brought all the leaders together. We passed the mic around. We asked questions. We helped each other. And so that's what AIE is all about, to try to make a space where we can hopefully find answers. And it did work out well on that one. And then shortly after that, we continued it online. But it was quite a time in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I want to paint an even maybe starker picture of my memory of this moment, because I think there's a real leadership lesson here. It's the last day of the conference. The cuts are announced in the newspapers. Mm-hmm. People in the State Department don't even necessarily know yet what's happening. So from an information standpoint, it's chaos, right? Everybody is reacting without really having clear, consistent, or even coherent information in certain cases. And it was an invitation. You didn't force people to come into the ballroom, but you invited everybody into the ballroom for lunch, for essentially like a situational awareness update, which makes a lot of sense. And then you pass the microphone around, which I thought was crazy in a great way. But I thought, oh my gosh, like this is really daring, because who knows, A, what people are going to ask, and B, maybe more importantly, emotionally, how are they going to react to this potentially really devastating news, depending on what school they're in. But you obviously thought this was a good idea. What was your theory about what would happen from that?
I'm not sure I had a theory on that one. I will say, I think, again, risk-taking is part of that one. But I really I had a fundamental trust that I know this community. I knew that most of the people in the room, and I knew that everybody wanted to help each other. Yeah. There was no grandstanding. There was no idea of like, I know better or where to go. It was a room of, we were all in the unknown. But I also did know we all wanted to help each other. So yeah, we did pass the mic. And then I stood up and said, we're going to continue this call next Tuesday. Join me on a Zoom call, and off we go. You know, we were going into the unknown. We didn't know what was going to be happening tomorrow or the next day. We did know that some of those in that room had lost many of their students, had lost board members, had lost a wide variety of people within their community. And so they needed a time to say, hey, this is what's going on. What's happening with y'all? And again, it's that breaking down of the silos. Let's come together. You know, we are better together.
Yeah. I mean, the energy in the room was palpable. And I'm sure that had it happened virtually, like I'm sure a Zoom call would have been incredibly helpful to people. But as someone who was not a direct stakeholder in the conversation, I'm an indirect stakeholder, but I felt like it was such an extraordinary act of leadership to leap without knowing where the net would be, but feeling like there's going to be some net to catch me, but I have to leap first, and to lead with the confidence to say, we don't have all of the answers right now, but what we do have is a room full of people who are really smart, who all share the same higher purpose. And I think that vulnerability and that trust that you demonstrated was clearly reciprocated many, many, many times over by everybody in the room. And again, I want to point that out because I don't think that that's an obvious thing for a leader to do, in the same way that to you, it was sure, I'll go to Kuwait. You know, I think to somebody else who had planned on teaching here in the US, that wouldn't be an obvious thing to do. You know, chaos comes down from the administration about cuts to funding, and it's being reported in real time on the internet to say, we're going to hold a group gathering and I don't have answers, but I trust that we're going to come up with something. That's that's more than risk taking. That's leadership.
Well, I will say, I was holding hands with others. So I am not going to take all of, thank you very much for saying that about AIE. And we were fortunate to be able to do this, but I was holding hands with others, with leaders from the Office of Overseas Schools. They were there helping us. I have an incredible board of trustees who went through like, this is what needs to be done. So AIE we're just very lucky to be surrounded by, the board that I have in place said, this is what needs to be done. The Office of Overseas, the leaders, everybody just came together. So thank you for saying that about AIE, but you need to know I was holding hands with a lot of other people, and while I was supporting them, they were supporting me. It's a two-way street. We're better together.
Oh, totally. I totally agree. And I want to talk now about the Tuesday morning calls, because I think that was a beautiful and brilliant extension of this particular one moment in time in DC in February. So we leave the conference. You've already established that there's going to be this call on Tuesday. Those calls happen every Tuesday morning.
Yes, I did.
For 4 months, 4 to 5 months.
Yes, I did.
But again, you didn't have answers week to week necessarily. So what was your thinking about like continuing those conversations? And there must have been some degree of risk that you were assuming by continuing the conversations without having clear answers.
Without a doubt, it was risk. But again, I am very lucky to be in touch with so many people around the world that each week something would come up. So I knew that we could bring conversations to the community to try to help resolve what was going on. So the Tuesday calls did come about. We, again, fortunate enough to have the Office of Overseas Schools with us every Tuesday to give an update about what they were hearing from this side. But at the same time, our schools were saying, this is what we're learning. This is what's happening. And so again, just setting the table, bringing people together to say, hey, what's going on? We're going to learn from each other. It's not like AIE doesn't have all the answers, but we do have the ability to bring people together and say, we are here for you and we want to be with you. So that's our call.
Yeah. It makes me think about something you said a few moments ago. And I want to connect it to what it means to be a change leader, because there's all different ways to approach that work. And a couple of moments ago, and then you just repeated it again, you said, I didn't do it by myself. I had the Office of Overseas Schools. I had my board, this whole community of leaders. I think probably when people hear the term change leader or change leadership, they probably default to the model of like the heroic leader, the one person who's sort of leading, and that is a certain version, right?
Without a doubt.
And what I'm hearing you say is that I wouldn't say it's the opposite, but you're almost saying like, well, I wouldn't do it that way, and I don't do it that way. Instead, I don't need to be the one with the ideas. I just need to be the person who brings together the people with the ideas.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and you might not have had a theory at the time, but that's that seems to be in your DNA as a change leader.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that. And again, surrounded by people who have just some great ideas and great comments. And I'm, driving down here today, I had another phone call with a great idea. Very fortunate place to be, to people reach out to us and say, this is an idea, this is where we want to go. And I love doing that kind of work. But I'm here to navigate that, but it's really the leaders within the schools that have to do the work. And so my job is to start the conversations, bring everybody together, and see if I can help find resources. But really, a change leader is somebody who listens, watches, sees what's going on, and then tries to roll with it and move in the right direction. And of course, mistakes are going to be made. I make mistakes all the time, but change directions, apologize, and move on. But again, change leaders, I'm going to go back to the leadership community that I work with. Every one of them are wanting the best for their students. And so they're the change leaders. I'm here to support them. And so if I can prop them up or build them together, bring them together, that's what my job is. But and it's a tough job. There's no question, not my job. Their job is a tough job.
You said something incredibly wise, and I want to pull it back out, and I want to say it very slowly because I think this is hugely important. We all make mistakes. I can write I could fill the internet with the number of mistakes I've
With you.
made, right? But you said you make the mistake, you change direction, you apologize, you move on. That's not easy to do. But I mean, you summed it up in 3 points. We can't, if we truly want to lead change, we can't afford to perseverate over these things. We have to change direction. Don't keep making the same mistake. We have to apologize
Without a doubt.
and then move on.
And look for a different pathway. I think some people, some leaders, I am going to say not the people I work with, but I think some leaders then just get frozen in time.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to walk into that room. And so it does take a special type of person to say, you know what? I'm going to go give this a try. I'm going to go do something. But again, it is a special personality. And again, I'm going to go back to that theme I started at the beginning, a risk taker.
Mhm.
You have to be somebody that can say, let's give this a try. And if it doesn't work, so be it. If it does, on we go.
Yeah. The former Duke basketball coach, Mike Krzyzewski, used to talk about this thing with his players that when they would make a mistake, whether it was in practice or in a game, they would make the mistake and they needed to shout out next play. That play was in the past. There's nothing to do to change it. I need to focus on the next play and not get stuck, as you were saying.
That's great.
Yeah. And I think there's really something important for us as leaders and working on our craft as leaders about, it's almost like, like the Buddhist notion of detachment. Like we can't get attached
Correct.
to our titles. We can't get attached to our ideas. We can't get attached to this particular thing we were trying to do.
We need to move on to the next play. I'm laughing when you say that. This Clemson graduate is
sorry.
with a Duke University, but anyways, that's exactly right. But again, people need to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And it is a craft. I think that once you stop realizing that it's a craft that you need to keep evolving, then maybe it's time to look for elsewhere. But again, every leader I work with knows it's a craft and they are continuing to work on it and move forward. And what I really love, what I've seen of late, is many of these are now taking that craft and they're taking their job and they're taking it to the students. Like, what's your idea? Where are you going with this?
Yeah.
What do you want? And so there's been maybe an evolution or a change. But I love seeing that. You have students now being part of boards. You have students that are driving curriculum. Kudos to them. Again, it's all part of and it is a risk that they're taking.
Yeah.
But good on them.
Yeah. And that brings me back to your comments about AI. I mean, I think the teachers and the school leaders who are having success with AI, they're engaging students in that
Correct.
conversation. They're not just telling students these are the policies. They're asking them, what do you think? How are you using this? How should we be using this?
And the juxtaposition that you're going to bring up there is when AI first came out. I'm based in Princeton, New Jersey, so we're in the New York area, and New York public schools came out immediately and said, no AI in the classroom. And I heard that, and I didn't agree, didn't understand. But then I turned around, I looked at the international schools, and I didn't hear that. I heard like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to move forward? What are we going to do? And so the dichotomy there was fascinating. And what I love is the international schools have continued on. They're doing the work, and New York turned the corner.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny you say that. When we at Middle States created that first endorsement for AI.
Right, rail.
And AI literacy, safety, and ethics is the first rail endorsement. And I just assumed, really out of naivete, that the segment of schools that would most want it would be domestic, independent schools. And it's actually ended up being international schools, that there's been a greater interest and appetite and awareness, I would even say, understanding of literacy around AI from international schools. And I wonder if that has something to do with what you described earlier as sort of like the third culture kid mindset, that there's always something to learn from wherever I am, and that the international school community is sort of maybe wired that way a little bit, that AI is a thing that we need to learn about and we can't stick our heads in the sand like the New York City public schools did.
No, I got you. It's interesting. But again, third culture kids or the kids growing up overseas, they are more of a risk taker. But I'm going to go back to your second point, and that is these schools are wired to be better, continue growth. What is the next thing? I am just amazed at the leaders, the people, the students that come out of these international schools, and the parents that are driving this are really saying, I want the best for my kids, and I know what's out there. And so the door is open for these schools to say, let's give this a try.
Yeah. I think there's probably something that you can share for the audience that would be really helpful. And we don't need to talk about any specific schools, but like when you scan the environment, what's a common failure mode for a school that's trying to engage with AI or special education needs and they're failing? Like what would be a typical move they make or set of moves they make that's almost certainly going to lead to failure versus a school that's maybe they're not succeeding in the fullest, most robust sense of that word, but they're making progress?
That's a hard question for me to answer because I'm not really sure that I can answer that specifically. I think my gut would say is if a school went all in on one direction instead of keeping options open. But again, I wouldn't say that I'm the expert to answer that question. I think all the schools are trying a variety of different arenas or different ways to go forward, especially with AI or the other issues that they're doing, social emotional learning and the aspects that they have to address. Working with neurodiverse students. So I just think the best way forward is looking at all options and giving it a try. But again, I'm not the expert in that arena.
No, but what you said makes total sense. There's this concept, obviously, of the Trojan horse, but that's a big thing that you're trying to introduce, right? There's another concept that I think you were gesturing at called Trojan mice. Rather than have one big go all in on one thing, as you said, savvy school leaders often place a lot of small bets to see which one's going to pay off, and they don't put all their eggs in the one basket. And I think that's often where school leaders can get in a lot of trouble if they've attached their ego to a big change project, as opposed to figuring out, which of these things might pay off, and then as they start to pay off, invest more and more in them without foreclosing opportunities.
I've got a side story on this one. Every Friday afternoon, AIE puts out what they call the Friday Fives. And it's a newsletter. Like
I read it religiously.
And I'm laughing because as you were talking about, the Trojan mice, my Friday Five last week was around projects. How many projects, and having too many projects can overwhelm a leader. Sure. If you've got too many things going on, and as you were talking, I remember there was one article in there that said like 5 projects. So again, I think it's finding those that right niche, that right idea. But I am laughing. We just did a Friday Five about maybe Trojan mice, but
slightly different language, but only 5. Yeah, no, it's a great point because to me that would also be a failure mode. One failure mode would be going all in on one thing. A different failure mode would be like, we're going to try to do everything. And then, the energy just gets too diffused. No school has that many resources.
That's exactly right. So
Yeah.
So,
how about these Tuesday morning calls and what came out of those calls for you as someone who was not in any one of those schools, but knowing that AAIE has to support all of these schools? What was maybe your biggest takeaway from those conversations? Because I will say, I sat in on them. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them, as a listener. I did, talk maybe once or twice, but I was really there to listen. And you were there mostly to listen and to draw people out because you had spoken to them offline, maybe, and you knew they had good things to share. But mostly you were listening. So I'm curious, what did you hear ultimately that felt like a takeaway for you?
My personal takeaway was what an incredible group of people were in that room to try to navigate these changes that are happening today on a wide variety of basis. So me on a personal level, so fortunate to be in with these people. My other takeaway was the unknown was immense. What they were trying to navigate was huge, and the aspect of coming together was good, but it didn't answer all the questions. No. They still had to hang up that call, I'm showing my age, end that call and go back to their position as a school leader. And truly, In every one of those situations, they, as a school leader, had to answer to so many people. They were answering to the parents, to the board, to their staff. Am I going to send you home? What's going to happen? And it was a really tough situation. And yet every one of them had the ethics and the wherewithal to navigate this as best they could. Were mistakes made? Maybe. I don't know. I can't say I can point to one, but I will say, as they walked away and turned their focus to their schools, I realized their job is immense.
Oh, man. Absolutely. Sitting in on those calls reminded me of how lonely that job is and how profoundly important it was for you to convene them and to do it in a way that was so emotionally intelligent and just caring. And I've said this to you before. I think your superpower is relationship building, and there were so many people on those calls because I saw the same faces and names week after week who never said a word, but they showed up every Tuesday and they stayed on the entire call, and they were not typing away. They were listening, and it was almost like you had created an environment that was vital for them to be able to go back to their school to do their job.
And again, it breaks down that silo. If you're a leader in this school in a country around the world, you are then have the ability to say, I know this is happening in other regions around the world.
Yeah.
So misery loves company, I think is in some ways is the old expression, but he was like, oh gosh, that school is having to deal with that as well.
Yeah.
I knew of schools that had to lay off 30 teachers. They were having to students were being pulled the next day. You had some pretty tough situations that were happening in a wide variety of places. People were losing members of their board. Faculty were being pulled away because their spouses had all of a sudden lost their job and they had to go. It was a really tough time. And so hearing those stories, hearing those voices to say, this is what's happening, maybe gave them some more empathy for what's happening out there, but also being able to say, we are not alone in this. So that's really what AI is about. We are going to bring you together. We're going to try and help you as best we can. And again, when you're hearing those stories within those calls, I know for a fact that, someone who said, this is what's happening, I've had to let go of these teachers, emails were sent around on the backside saying, hey, I got a position for one of those teachers that you're letting go. And this is where the community really comes together. And I know this for a fact. Some of the people who are having to ask their teachers to leave were being told of jobs in other parts of the world to help support each other. Again, that's the uniqueness of this community. And again, just such a blessing of these schools.
Yeah. Maybe we can end with your talking a little bit about how you, I would say another superpower for you, which is an extension of the relationship building, is building a team, and how you think about your AAIE team. Sort of like the next circle out would be AAIE plus the overseas schools office, maybe. And then this wider community, which really feels like a team. I mean, you just described what does a team do? They share the ball, right? So how do you think about building a team? Like what are your, do you have like values or principles that you start from?
That's a really interesting question. And I think any leader has to address that. They have to know what they want, where they want. It's a value-driven proposition. And so my idea of being helpful, and again, maybe it's the educator in me. And again, I was 20 years in the classroom. You are here to serve others. Now, AIE is a service organization. And so that's our job. And so the team that I have built, and I've got two incredible women on my team. I cannot speak more highly of who is around me and those who are supporting me, but it's a value-driven proposition. It is about finding people who have the same ethos as you. And so as a school leader, you have to do this. And again, I think that's what I try to set up within AIE. Let's all come together and help each other. None of us, you keep talking about superpowers, so I'm laughing. I don't have any superpowers. I'm just really fortunate to be where I am, but that's who we need to be. We need to be here with each other. No one is leading the crowd.
Yeah. Is helping, is that the word that you would use for like the primary value that drives the way you build teams, or is there something else?
Helping it would be a key word. I just had a conversation with somebody this morning, and the word that came up, and it was a situation, it was the word kindness. And I think this world as a whole needs more kindness these days. And so I think kindness, being honest, being my value is to work with people, to help each other and be kind. We're all going through tough times. Each of us have our own closet that we're dealing with, whether it's professionally or personally, but we are here together. And so I think kindness is truly an important word for me. And, the mandate with AIE is to help lead with integrity, honesty, and vision. And so let me maybe perhaps end this conversation by talking about that's what AIE is here, to work with integrity. I think that's just a key word. Vision, try to look to the future and help people move forward.
Yeah. Laura, thank you so much for sharing this wisdom with our audience. And I am thrilled that we're connected, and I look forward to many more conversations.
Well, thank you, Christian. I'm honored to be here. Middle States is doing some incredible work. I watch what you've done with the rail program. I see what's happening with Middle States. So kudos to you and your team. And I look forward to more collaboration with y'all.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.